Check, check, check.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Virgil Wiebe. I'm the Director of Legal Clinics here at St. Thomas. It's great to see you. I think our numbers are going to swell as the evening goes on, and I'm certain into tomorrow. I'm just going to go to the podium as I have a few notes here. First, I'd like to thank AALS and CLIA for co-sponsoring the event. If you haven't gotten your memberships up to date, it's very easy to find those organizations online and update your membership. Also, the firm of Coase & O'Connor, it's a new firm here in town. They are very much involved in our bankruptcy clinics, and they've graciously also co-sponsored the events this weekend. Kathy Mann Arnott, Krishel Shell, and Chitra Vairavan are our outstanding support staff. They keep our clinics running, and they've done an excellent job in helping to organize this weekend, and we're very grateful to them. I would also like to introduce George Baboila, our Director of Social Work Services, part of the triumvirate of the Interprofessional Center. And if you'd like to know more about the center, ask us afterwards. In your packets, it talks about affinity groups. It says what day, but not what time. Those are at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning and Sunday morning. And there are two kinds of evaluations we're doing this weekend. There's more of a global one that just has a few simple questions in your packet. And then after each session, we're going to have evaluations that will immediately go directly to the presenters, unless the presenters would rather not have them. And we're not going to collect them as the conference, just to provide some feedback to the presenters. So, if you have questions, find me or one of the folks wearing volunteer badges. And immediately following this session, we'll have a reception back where you registered, and then dinner. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our presenters.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Wonderful, Virgil. Good job. My name's Jason Eyster, and we're going to be speaking about inspiration. I don't know if any of you who are way back up there in the clouds would like to move down here, not to put any pressure on you. No, okay, well, good. Good, that's fine. The topic of this year's conference is Harnessing the Storm, and it talks about the challenges that we're facing. And one of the big challenges is the challenge to ourselves, to our students, about the whole nature of law schools and what's happening. Are we shrinking? Are we going out of business? People said, has your school closed yet? You know, that sort of thing. So there is this sense that we really need to inspire ourselves, and we need to inspire our students. And I and my colleagues have been thinking about this, and we wanted to share with you our idea really about how we can inspire you. Could I have you come up and... Okay. Climb every mountain, search high and low, follow every byway, every path you know. Climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow till...
What is going on here?
Well,
what are you guys doing?
we're trying to inspire everyone.
With a cheesy 1960s musical number?
Well, all right. I know you've thought a lot about this, and you think, whoa, maybe there's some other ideas that we can engage in. Oh, we forgot. Okay, well, that's all right. It's multitasking. Okay, we can keep. Why don't we move on to the next one? All right. Seriously, as they say. Today we're going to be talking about 4 different topics which may be useful to you to glean something about how to inspire yourselves, your students, your clients. I'm going to be talking about one way to inspire students that I hope will leave a lasting impression upon you. And then we're going to talk about what would you do if you were not afraid. Tricia's going to talk to us about that, and she'll be formally introduced in just a moment. And then what happens when we start inspiring and things go wrong, or when we just can't seem to inspire people? And Carrie's going to help us with that. And then finally, with all of this, how do we stay grounded and focused in this inspiration in order to go forward? So I'm going to speak first. I'm from Cooley Law School from the Ann Arbor campus. Cooley has 5 different campuses, as you may know. It's a nonprofit law school, 40 years old, dedicated to access over exclusivity, and I'm in Ann Arbor. I wanted to talk with you about this question of how do we inspire students. It used to be, it was thought that inspiration came from the gods. They would whisper in your ear, and you'd become inspired. Psychologists have, some people still think that's the case, and maybe, I don't want to say anything against that. Some people are still inspired from upstairs. So, but what modern psychology, in speaking and looking to this, says that even if that is true or is not true, it is true that inspiration does not come from our consciousness. It's prior to our being conscious, and that's why we have these aha moments. Suddenly, something is clear. It pops into our consciousness. It's also not based on our skills. It's not because we get very good at something that we're inspired. The inspiration comes to us outside of that skill set. So how does it take place? A number of teachers, in talking about inspiration, say it's so individual, there's no way to really use that as part of our curriculum. There's no ways to use that as a skill set of how are we going to inspire our students. However, I'd like to suggest one way that I think we can inspire. As we grow, I like to think of us growing like these nested Russian dolls. So we start off with a core, and then as we develop, we create larger copies of ourselves, but they're shaped and molded by the current events that are taking place around us. And so we can be inspired at any stage of our lives. So what does inspire students and clients and professors, and especially law students? Next. I'd like you to take a few minutes and think about someone who's inspired you. A professor, a teacher, it could be someone else, but particularly someone who's inspired you to either become involved in social justice, to become a professor. And then, can you recall a specific, a lot of times that's not too hard. I can think, oh, there was that chemistry teacher in high school or something. But was there a specific event? Was there something that he or she did that inspired you? And I'll suggest something, and then I'd like to spend, say, 4 or 5 minutes for you just to silently think about this and maybe write something down. When I was in law school, Professor Archie Robertson was teaching torts, and he brought in this game called the Tower of Hanoi. And the challenge in this game, anybody played this game? Are you familiar with this game? Yes. Are you from Hanoi? No, but yet you know this game. Great. Anybody else? No? Oh, very good, Virgil. Good job. He's so impressive. So with this game, you try to get all of these donuts from one spot to the next in order, and you can only move one at a time. And so the professor was trying to get us thinking about the way that we analyze a case in terms of thinking about the facts, of thinking about the law, of really analyzing carefully. So he said, who would like to come up and do this game? And I walked up, and I started just fooling around, not knowing what I was doing. And he made a great deal of fun of me, a lot of mockery about being very thoughtless and doing these things. But yet, even though he was doing that, he was still pretty supportive. And there was something in his eye that made me think, I could be a professor someday. It's not just this, standing up and talking about this sort of dry constitutional law. This fellow brought a toy into school. Someday I could even bring a ukulele to a conference and speak. So it was. I think that was very inspiring to me about that I could see myself as that. Next, please. We'll go back, actually. You can go back. There we go. Okay, so I'd like you now to spend some time thinking of someone who's inspired you and trying to identify an event in which or a moment where that person inspired you. then feel free to write it down, to formalize it for yourself. You don't have to share. Okay. My thesis is that if you respect someone, and I think that's the first key when we talk about who inspires us. If you have respect for an expert, and that person expresses a statement of belief. So for example, when your mother says, I know you can do that, you can win that race, you can get an A, you can, unless your mother to you is an expert who has done that, we tend to discount it. But when someone we know, someone who has won that race, someone who has made that achievement, when that individual expresses belief in us, I think that goes a long way to make someone inspired. And I've been doing interviews with my students, with other faculty members, and I often come across that it's that belief in the other person. And so I challenge all of you, not certainly without true feeling, but where you do find that there are students that you do believe in, for you to take those students aside, especially when the students have respect for you, that you take those students aside and you tell them, you know, I think that you will make a great lawyer. I think it will indeed inspire them, and they'll look back 30 years when they're at some conference like this, and they'll say, I remember when Professor so-and-so said that to me. And even if you don't say it, just like Professor Robertson never said to me, I think you'll whatever, still there was something in his eye, there was a way he acted toward me, this positive attitude that gave me a lot of self-assurance and directed me in a path I might not have gone in. Great. Thank you very much. And next, I'm going to be introducing Patricia Harrison. Patricia is from that great school of St. Louis University, where we all were last year for our clinical conference. And as you may remember, the mascot of St. Louis University is the Billiken. And the Billiken motto here, I love this, grin and begin to win. And she is going to be talking to us about what would you do if you were not afraid.
Thank you, Jason. So this summer, I was not feeling inspired. I'm sure all of you, well, maybe not all, but I bet many of you have had that experience. You've been doing this for a while. You've had, I've been doing this for 7 years, so I've taught the same class 14 times, and I've had the same syllabus, and I try to tweak it here or there. But sometimes you start to feel stagnant. You start to feel uninspired. And so I read a book, and it was by Sheryl Sandberg. Some of you may have read it or heard about it. It's called Lean In. And Sheryl is the COO of Facebook. And in her book, she was talking about how does she inspire her coworkers? How does she inspire her employees? And in Facebook, they have a sign up on the wall that says, what would you do if you were not afraid? And she uses this quote to try to get you to think about fear in a different way. So I want to talk about fear in a positive way. If you think about fear, many times it's that middle thing. It can paralyze you. It makes our students become the avoiders. I call them the disappearing acts. They're supposed to be there on Monday from 10 to 3, and you don't see them all day. Or you give them an assignment and you give them a due date, and you don't hear anything until 5 minutes before the due date. Can I have an extension, please? Sometimes it can make us feel stagnant. As I talked about this summer, I was feeling sort of like, I'm getting kind of bored. What can I do? But really, if you look at fear in a different way, it can be a motivator. It can be inspiring. And if we can overcome our fears, many times it can change our lives. It can change the way we teach. It can change the way we supervise. It can change the way we treat our clients. It can change the way we try cases or create transactional documents. So if we use that fear in a positive way, it can be very inspiring. So, what would you do if you weren't afraid? I want you to write down 1 or 2 things that you're afraid of. And what would you do if you confronted it? How would you confront it? Would you confront it? So I want you to take 1 or 2 things to think about that. What would you do if you weren't afraid of that thing? Is it something related to teaching? Is it something related to supervision? Is it something in your personal life? And just take a moment. I want you to write down 1 or 2 things. And I am going to ask you to share. So whenever anyone has something they want to share, please, we have a microphone right here. We would love for someone to come up and participate and put themselves out and confront their fear of speaking in front of an audience, confront their fear of sharing something personal about themselves. And I'm not going to go on until somebody volunteers. That would be excellent. Yes? Yes.
Good.
Oh.
I mean, I will tell you what I wrote.
Great.
That I would eat and drink a lot more if I weren't afraid of taking care of my, of my health and getting fat or becoming an alcoholic. So that may not be what you were going for, but that's literally what I thought of.
So you would have more fun in your life. You would maybe do a little bit more fun stuff. Okay.
I'm not afraid of fun. I am afraid of eating and drinking too much. Not in a paralyzing way, but just, I have those tendencies.
Okay. I don't know what to do with that, so let's see who else we can. Thank you for sharing and for breaking the silence and moving us forward.
If anybody else wants to wave at me as well.
Yeah, we'll give you the microphone.
I'll add
That's
something.
great.
Here.
Thank you.
I've been playing the saxophone for a number of years, but had a fear of playing in public. So I would just play for my own pleasure, and I was my only audience, except for my wife, who was lukewarm. So this summer, I decided to address that fear. So I started playing on my lunch hour on the sidewalk in front of our building.
Wow.
And it was kind of in a little alcove, so I wasn't real visible. And people, occasionally would walk by, but I was kind of alone, but in public. And then I started getting some positive feedback, and occasionally someone would throw me $1. So then I decided to take it to the next level. And there's a bar that every Wednesday has a local jazz jam session. So I've sat in twice now with that band. And I'm talking now I've gotten to know some musicians over the last few years. One band in particular, that I've gotten to know pretty well, and now we're talking about working up a few songs that I will sit in with them.
Excellent.
So gradually working my way through my fear of playing in public.
So let me ask you some questions. What's underlying the fear? What's behind it?
Nobody wants to make a fool of themselves.
Yes?
I was not confident that I played well enough that it would be well accepted.
Yes. So you were fear of embarrassment, fear of not having the skills.
Yeah.
And then what was the first step? How did you get yourself to take that first step?
Not getting any younger.
Okay. So the first step, you put yourself out in sort of a somewhat safe way, sort of a anonymous kind of way, felt some good positive feedback, worked on your skills some more.
Yeah.
Then you did what? You sort of pushed yourself further to a new level.
Yes. Going to a bar and actually sitting in with a band. Really
Reached out to people who had been doing it for a while, were experts in the field, sort of, you know, had
yes,
gotten
I was well outclassed.
and relied on them to support you and to encourage you and to help you develop your skills.
Yeah, as a group, similar to clinicians, I would say, musicians are very open and welcoming and supportive.
And now you're going to take it to an even higher level and try to be creative in this new arena that you've explored.
Yeah, working with a band that I know and actually preparing a few songs, not just sitting in, not knowing what the playlist is. And
Excellent. Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to share? Do you have one back here? Excellent.
Well, this is, I guess, along the lines you were talking about how fear can be positive.
Yes.
A couple years ago, my husband, who's very, you probably meet him tonight, he's very young, slender, fit, and athletic, had a heart attack. And I've lived with the fear of losing him since then, and I think it has really caused me to appreciate him and to notice when he needs caregiving and when things are getting too stressful for him. You know, you don't want to, I wouldn't say I live in fear, but fear has sensitized me to some really important stuff.
Yeah, made you appreciate time, where you put your time. Great, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? I don't want to cut off anyone's opportunity to share. So we've talked a little, I asked some questions about, I didn't ask you what was behind your fear, but I can, yeah, you love him, that's right. But many times our students come to us and we ourselves have a lot of fear. But mainly our students tend to come to us because they've had a memory of a bad past experience. Something's happened that's created this anxiety or this fear. And so they don't want to have that experience again because it was awful when they did it the first time. You talked about sort of this fear of the unknown or not kind of knowing where it would go, also that fear of looking stupid or being embarrassed or not feeling confident. Can you think of any other reasons that our students or we have this fear and sort of what's underlying it and how we get into this sort of paralyzed or stagnant place? Yes?
Sometimes they fear just the responsibility they have toward the client, that if I mess up, I'm going to really mess up my client.
Absolutely. I see another hand? Yes?
Competitive nature of law school. Bar passage rates, job placements, they've got all this on their brain, weighing on their shoulders.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Oh, yes. Grades? Grades. Absolutely. Yeah, wanting to do a good job and that grade's very important to their future. So I decided to give my students a new assignment this year. I went outside of my comfort zone with my syllabus, and before I even met them, I sent them an email with this assignment. And the first part of the email was, here is my personal philosophy. This is why I do what I do. These are my fundamental beliefs. And I shared that with them first. And I asked them to now create their own personal philosophy of what they were coming to me with and what they expected and wanted their experience to be with, their experience with me to be like. So I asked them these questions about what do you fundamentally believe about yourself, about the world, about what it means to be a lawyer. And then I ended with this question of what would you do if you weren't afraid? And they had to send it back to me, and I graded it. And my expectation is now to use that information throughout the semester, which I have, and I'll share some of that with you. But also now the last assignment, which will be coming up soon, I'm sure all of you or many of you may do a reflection paper. Now that last assignment, they're going to have to reflect back on, has their personal philosophy changed? Or did they do what they were afraid of? And so some of the quotes, oh, there we go. Some of the quotes that I got back from students about what they were afraid of, what they would do if they weren't afraid. First, someone said I would voice my opinion more. And so the way I've approached this with this student is I've given her opportunities to confront that fear. I call on her. I ask her her opinion in class, in front of her peers. I'm working on giving her resources. I gave her an article about sort of confidence in public speaking and how to find your voice. And I'm working on skills with her. In our private sessions, we talk about, how did you feel when I asked you those things in class? And what kinds of strategies could you take in a different way? I had a student say, I would teach parents how to parent better. And of course, this came from a student who is not a parent herself. And so instead of sort of having that conversation and trying to make her feel kind of, weird about having this position of authority and experience before she even has children, I'm giving her opportunities to work with parents. I'm giving her resources to understand what parents that we work with go through and what kinds of resources are available to them to help them become better parents. And I'm giving her opportunities to hear their stories about how they got to where they are. And that they never knew how to be a parent other than the parent that they had. Or maybe their experience was they were beaten as a child, and so of course now that's what they're following through. And then I'm working on skills with her to be open and to hear that there are lots of different ways of parenting. And that those who are not parents and have never parented certainly shouldn't be standing in the position of telling other parents how to parent, but helping her explore different ways of working through that versus having her go out and confront that fear by sitting one of my clients down and telling them how to be a better parent. Several of my students said I would do public interest work if I wasn't afraid. What do you think is behind that fear? What do you think they're afraid of? Debt, finances, What else? Employment, good. That's exactly right. And so, I can't solve that problem, right? I can't take away their debt, and I can't sort of help them with that. But a lot of you have probably heard that or heard that fear in your students. How do you sort of deal with that issue? How do you help them work through that so that they can pursue what they want to do? Anybody have any thoughts on what you've been talking to your students about or helping them with that? Yes?
One of the things that I talk about with my students is getting them over the idea that their first job is the job for life, and helping them understand that it's a stepping stone.
Yeah.
And that work and life are stepping stones. And that they shouldn't just think that that's going to be it and that's going to kind of define their repayment terms or their income or anything. Plus just their bigger career goals in terms of what they want to do in the future.
Yeah.
Might not be what they're doing right now. And
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, good. I'm going to move on because we're on a time schedule here. So the way I have been working with my students to help them confront their fears and work through these issues is, number one, to help them identify the source of their fear. I sort of gave you some examples of what tends to be underlying the fear, and I talk with them about that. Why are you afraid of this? Are you afraid because you're afraid of being embarrassed or because putting yourself out there makes you uncomfortable? Are you afraid because you had a bad experience? And then we create an action plan. I talked a moment ago about sort of these three things: giving them opportunities, giving them resources, and helping them develop and enhance skills. And then I push them to confront the fear, but I also support them with resources and encouragement. And I decided over the summer to see my role with them differently. I now see myself as a coach. And I see myself as someone who is there to support them, but to push them. And I think I used to see myself as a teacher and a supervisor. And I saw those roles very differently. And now I see myself more as a coach. So sometimes sort of thinking about how you see your role can help them overcome them. So I want to give an example of how I used this with a student that was very successful. I had an appeal that needed to be done. And I put out, we were having a group meeting, and I said to the group, I have this appeal, who wants to work on it? And of course, nobody said anything. But one student said, well, don't give it to me. I don't want to work on that. I said, here you go. Thanks for volunteering. And she was really upset with me, and she came to me, and I said, why are you afraid to work on this? And she said, well, I had a horrible experience in LRW. Horrible experience. I got a terrible grade. They said my writing was awful. My moot court was terrible. The judges said I was awful. It was horrible. My partner I worked with, she was terrible. She was mean. I said, okay, well, I can show you a different experience. Let's work together to have a different experience. I'm going to give you this opportunity to overcome what has now become in your mind the worst, awful, terrible thing that you never, ever want to do again. And I'm going to give it to you in a different way so that you're going to love it and want to do this for the rest of your life. And so she kind of looked at me funny. And so I gave her resources. I put 2 other students on the brief with her. And I gave her the opportunity to have the experience of brainstorming a brief, brainstorming the issues, researching and sharing the research together, working on the writing together, editing it together. And then I gave her the opportunity to moot court it 3 times with the whole group. And so each time she got better and better and more confident. And then she went before the Court of Appeals and she argued that case and she knocked it out of the park. And I had told her before we went in, don't worry, I'll handle the rebuttal. You've got the oral argument. You got the first part. I'll do the rebuttal. She sat down after her argument. I passed her a note and said, you got the rebuttal. Because she was so glad she didn't have to do the rebuttal, right? She was so afraid of that. I said, you got it. And she looked at me and I didn't look at her. She got up, she knocked it out of the park. She did great. She just needed to be supported and pushed. She wrote in her reflection paper, it was life-changing. It was one of the greatest experiences she ever had. She said, I probably will never do it again, but it was great. And she was so glad she had that opportunity. So now I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Hagan, and she's going to talk with you about when we inspire students, what do we do when things go wrong?
Don't you love how we go from singing to positive energy, and then I get to be the depressing one, right? Because my whole topic is, right, the whole, the dark side. The dark side of inspiration, right? Because it's great. It's great when we can inspire students. But what when we can't, right? What about those that are totally checked out, that are totally useless, and we can't figure out what's going on? How do we inspire those? How do we inspire ourselves to deal with those, right? That's the challenge as well. We're going to show you what this looks like. You all know what this looks like. You know what this feels like. But we thought because we are the plenary players, we will act it out for you, right? But these are common problems. Disengagement, disinterest, hostility, entitlement, boredom. How much of this sounds familiar, right? I'm not talking about the good stuff, about the excitement. How do we turn those things around? How do we deal with lack of work product or subpar work product for the entire semester? Lack of reflection, lack of participation. I mean, are these people clinically depressed or what?
Clinically depressed.
I've had that. We've all had that, right? How do we do that? So what we'd like to do now is we would like to do a skit. We're not going to make you do that. Feel relief. Sit back. Relax. We're going to show you what 2 of these student situations look like. I want you to think about them as we enact them. After we're done, I'm going to make you do a little work in some pairs, and then we're all going to reflect as a group. So let's see what the dark side looks like. Let's think about how to challenge it. Plenary players? Okay. We need to wake you people up before the drinks. Hi, Trish. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you, Professor?
I'm good. Why don't you bring me up to date with your work in the Nazib case?
Well, I'm almost finished with his work authorization. Since I just am asking for renewal, there really isn't much to do. I just repeat the same information as before.
Was anything changed in the law? Are you sure she shouldn't be applying for deferred action instead? Have you thought about that?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, frankly, this isn't really very interesting. If I may say so, this is the 6th week of the term, and I haven't gotten to go to court yet. I don't have a case that's even going to go to court. And, I took clinic because the course description said that I would get to go to immigration court.
Okay. Well, actually, we just received a letter from a detainee in Monroe County Jail. He's facing expedited removal. That means he could be deported any day, unless we can get a stay. If we could get a credible fear hearing soon, we may be able to apply for asylum and get him out of jail. If you want it, if you can go down there and find out about his case, it's yours.
Oh, yeah. I want to do that.
Okay. Well, can you go there today? Because I don't like to think of anyone being there a day longer than necessary.
Oh, well, today? Well, can I just go first thing in the morning?
If you can go tomorrow, that's fine. I'm going to Minneapolis for a clinical conference, so just email me once you do and tell me what happened and what your plans are for getting him a hearing. And also remember to review your Nazib case.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll do that. I'm so excited. Thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Sure.
Hey, Prof. Sorry I'm late. I overslept.
Well, thank you for your text, but I'd appreciate it if you'd be on time. But let's just go ahead and get started.
All right.
Well, so where do you want to start?
Oh, I don't know. Wherever you want to, I guess.
Well, this is really for you, for us to go through at your pace. So why don't you tell me what's going on, and we'll work through your cases one by one.
Wait, so you want to know what's going on in my cases?
Yeah?
Well, everything's fine.
Well, so what about the email I just got saying your client Baker called and was confused as to whether you were taking his case and why you hadn't called him back?
Yeah. Well, I set a telephone conference for yesterday morning at 10 o'clock. I called him right at 10 o'clock, and when I called, he said he couldn't talk right now. I was like, I can't believe this. I asked him when I could talk to him, and he said he didn't know. I want off this case because he doesn't appreciate me or my work.
Doesn't he have neurological issues? Isn't that why he's on disability?
Well, yeah, but then he had the audacity to call in this morning and act like he had never talked to anyone, and is confused about what we're even doing.
Well, have you thought about the fact that his neurological issues might be causing his forgetfulness? Okay, we'll come back to that. Let's talk about your Thomas divorce. I know at our last meeting, all you needed to do was draft the petition and a letter to the client giving her options going forward.
Right.
So have you done that? Do you have anything to look over? You didn't bring your files in. Do you not remember us talking about that?
No, I remember. I just didn't know I was supposed to do anything.
Well, I also was wondering why your mid-semester reflection journal was 2 days late after I gave everyone a day-and-a-half extension.
Yeah, well, with that, I've got a good excuse. I got back from Vegas really late on Friday, and I just totally forgot about it.
Right. But I sent a notice on Sunday regarding the extension until Monday night, and I still didn't get yours until Tuesday. All right, look, here's what we're going to do. I want you to rewrite your journal thoughtfully. I want you to draft your petition and letter and submit everything to me by 5 p.m. today. There are no exceptions. I also want you to draft a letter to your client explaining you've taken his case and that you would like him to call you when you receive his letter, when he receives your letter.
So what's due at 5?
4 days later.
Welcome back, Professor. How was your conference?
It was good. It was a little odd. There was this guy who sang Climb Every Mountain. Other than that, it was pretty enjoyable. But, beyond that, why don't you tell me what's going on with your new detainee case? I got your email.
Oh, yeah, Jorge Ramirez. He is such a puppy dog. I just really like him. I mean, he's so sincere, and it was really exciting. But, going to the jail was a little scary. But I have to say, it was the first time I actually felt like a real lawyer. And my father's so proud of me that I'm doing clinic.
Okay, I think that's great. Let's talk about your email. You emailed me that he hadn't had a credible fear hearing yet, though, and that he expected to be removed any day. Did you arrange a hearing for him?
Well, I called the field office on Friday, and I left a message.
Okay, well, this is Tuesday. You know how serious it is that we schedule a hearing so we can stop his removal. Then we can work on his asylum case and maybe get him bonded out of detention until the hearing takes place.
Okay, I'll call again.
Well, you need to keep calling until you get through, and also call the alternate numbers that I gave you. I don't understand why you let 4 days go by without making contact.
Well, my sister had a baby shower this weekend, and I stayed at her house all weekend, and you know, my mind just really wasn't on schoolwork. It's so exciting. I mean, I love my new niece.
Okay. Why don't you go?
Okay.
Hey, Prof, I got your email about pulling me off that protection order case. Like, what's going on?
Well, what's going on? I told you. I expected your drafts and journal 4 days ago. I've heard nothing. You've been skipping your office hours without notice and not sent any notice. What's happening?
Oh no, I can't believe it. Oh my God, I'm just dying. I'm so upset.
What's the matter?
Well, I called the jail and they said that Jorge's not there anymore. And I called ICE and they said they've removed him this morning. And oh my God, he's going back to El Salvador. It's all my fault.
C'est fini. So clearly I'm going to lose my job. I'm just going to put that out there. Any of that sound familiar? You're like, no, you're a terrible professor. It's okay. Fine with that. I'm going up for promotion next year. You can send that in, right? Any of that look and feel somewhat similar? I mean, we've all had these challenges, right? They're not fun to see, they're not fun to listen to, and they're not fun to deal with. But let's figure out how we are doing that. Part of our fear, I think, as a clinician is we work in these small, dynamic, exciting, enthusiastic, inspiring settings, right? So when there's a problem, it's hard to bring the hammer down, right? We have to see these people all the time. We're dependent on them, but it's still our job to call them on these mistakes. So how are we doing that as a group? What I'd like us to do now is just in pairs of 2 or 3, think about one problem that you've had, one challenge, we won't use the problem, one challenge you've had with a student. How did you handle that, even if you did nothing, and what the result was? So if you'd think about it, if you'd turn to your neighbor, if you would share that, it's a little bit like group therapy, right? You're going to feel better already. Share with everyone else, and then we're going to take about 5 minutes to talk about that, so get it all out, right? And then we're just going to see how we're doing this as a group.
Great acting. Great acting.
Only because I've seen it so many times. want to.
I do. Oh, yeah, sure.
Then I'll let you, when Carrie's done with her thing, then I'll.
She's going to be introducing you,
Yeah,
and then I'll
so-
interrupt.
Oh, okay. Great.
All right. I am very glad for all. See, look at how good this feels. Everybody's venting. Isn't it great? Right? About really not such fun stuff. I know I'm going to interrupt you. Feel good sharing a horrible scenario? Hearing about somebody else's? Understanding that you're not alone, right? That's the whole point of this. I am not going to make everybody report back as much as I want to, right? Because we'll do it over dinner. But I do think that as a group, we should see how are we handling this? How are we inspiring ourselves? How are we inspiring our students? Can we turn this behavior around? So we're going to do a collective show of hands, right? How many of us in here have ever had a problem with a student? Can we double fist? Right? Woo! How many of us have ever ignored that problem? Some people are like, Does what? Sure. Stewing on accounts. How many of us have ever confronted the student about the problem? Is there anyone that hasn't? You're like, I'm not admitting to that. It's hard. Good for you. Thank you from the back. Yeah, you stewed on it.
Depends on, I had this curious situation where there were sort of accusations between two students. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
wasn't in a position to know, like, who's telling the truth. And so I haven't acted on it yet. I'm kind of hoping that something will pop out and confirm to me what's going on.
You'll learn everything you need to know right now. I'm just kidding. It's challenging, isn't it? Right? We don't like dealing with the hard stuff. We like the inspiring, the good lessons. When you see that light bulb click on, that's where it really counts. But when they're totally deadbeat, we have to call them on it. And that's very challenging for us to do. We need to think about how do we inspire ourselves to do that. Maybe the first time's a little rough. You got to get your method down. Trish and I were just talking, right? Maybe the first time you do it isn't so great. But the more we do that, the more we inspire ourselves to call them on it, not to stew, not to ignore. We all know what happens when you ignore, right? It's not pleasant. We pick up the pieces. The more we can do that, hopefully the better results that we will produce. I am done depressing you. We are now here to give you solid, grounded advice, and David's going to share that with us.
David, I know you want. I'd like to talk about this instead. Can everybody stand up? Everybody stand up. I'm really familiar. This is staying grounded. Everybody stand up. Okay. So I want you to think of your right foot now. Imagine that it's just really grounded, and you can feel the roots going. Right. Lift up your left foot in the air. There we go. Good. All right. Now grab your foot here. Put it like this, and go like that. Oh, wow, we're all grounded. Good work. Okay, I guess we're done. Or did you have anything you wanted to add?
Couple things.
Okay, you can sit down.
So, thank you. Thank you, Jason, for that. And in case anybody was wondering if this was a clinical conference or not, Jason gave us ample evidence that it actually is a clinical conference, because God bless AALS, but it doesn't happen so much there. So, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about sort of some of the themes we picked up on. And as you can tell, you mentioned that nobody wants to make a fool of themselves. We don't suffer from that. So, so in the continuing theme of that, I'm going to give it a shot. One of the things that we sort of a classical clinical pedagogical tool is reflection. I mean, that's what we do in all of our classes with our students. We have them write reflective journals, reflective exercises, reflection this, reflection that. So a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today is about reflection to inspire. So instead of having reflection always be about, well, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? And all that kind of stuff. But to think about it as a way to inspire your students. We've been doing this. I've been teaching for 12 years now. I've been doing it for the last 10 years with my clinical students. A particular reflective exercise that actually Jason's passing out. And there's a million different reflective exercises out there, different centering techniques and things like that. This is just one of them, so bear with me a little bit. And I'm going to sort of model this for you a little bit, talking about something my students and I did this past week. Before I do that, let me just tell you that it comes from St. Ignatius, who was, we all know the new Pope's a Jesuit. So the Jesuits have been getting a little bit more attention lately. And I'm big into Jesuit spirituality and stuff like that. I teach a class on Ignatian spirituality and the law. I'm working on being a Jesuit companion, becoming a spiritual director. My students and some other people, because I'm so into this, I even got the Jesuit tattoo. So I'm really into the whole Jesuit thing. So I find it informs my life because it helps with sort of the ups and the downs, what St. Ignatius called the consolations and the desolations that life involves, especially among our clinical students. So it speaks to me. I don't imagine it speaks to everybody else. I also strip all the religion out of it because I'm not here to proselytize. I'm not terribly religious myself. So it's a way to sort of use an exercise that came up with several hundred years ago that still has relevance today. So let me talk a little bit about how this works. And I hasten to add that one of St. Ignatius's famous quotes is, "Go out and set the world on fire." Well, so I'm from Detroit. If you know anything about Detroit, you know that we have this annual tradition called Devil's Night, where people torch buildings. So that was the night before Halloween, a couple nights ago. We were very happy in Detroit. We only had 134 house fires that night. So that's down. That's way down. I mean, it got close to 1,000 back about 10, 15 years ago. So now maybe there may not be that many houses left to burn, which is its own issue. But so when he says go out and set the world on fire, it doesn't mean with cans of gasoline and stuff like that. So let me model this for you a little bit. In my students, we start with this the first day of class. And so they're sort of, by now really ingrained in this. So my students and I were going down to the Monroe County Jail, oddly enough, the place that was in the vignette. It is one of the inner rings of hell in Monroe County, Michigan. Not a nice place to be. We've got a client who's got an individual hearing coming up next Wednesday, a young man from Mauritania. And we've got 6 witnesses. We've got exhibits through Triple T. It's a major all-day individual hearing. It's going to be a big deal. So I was driving 2 students down there. This is about 7:45 last Tuesday morning. It's early in the morning. We're heading down to the jail. Everyone's apprehensive, nervous, all this kind of stuff. So we get in the car. We pull out of the law school parking lot. And one of the students says, "So when do we start?" And I was like, "What do you mean, when do we start? When do we start your thing you do?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, the thing we do, right? I don't know, so go ahead and start." So they said, "Okay, well, the first thing is light." So we're driving down I-75, the light's coming up over the Detroit River. They're like, "Oh, there's the light. Okay, it's a nice day, it's light." So then they said, okay, next thing comes thanks. Thanks, we're in the car, it's nice and warm and toasty. Koelsch got us coffee, it's all good. And we're heading down to the jail to really, sort of do something for this person that could be life-changing. Life-changing for him, life-changing for us, maybe life-changing for the whole system if we can do it in a good way. So it's really kind of a good and sort of something to be very thankful for. The other thing we sort of talked about is, well, what are our feelings? One student had been to the jail before, so she knew what to expect. She knew about the correctional officers treat people like crap. The conditions to meet with your client, you have to scream through a little slot in the window because the telephones don't work to reach your client across the glass. Your client's locked up in a big pod with a bunch of felons, so he's having a really tough time with that. He's 21 years old. He misses his mother. All these kind of things. So she sort of experienced all that kind of stuff. The other student hadn't, so she was a bit freaked out. So they were talking about what are their feelings. So the one was able to help the other student to say, well, yeah, it's crappy. It's a very inhumane setting, but here's how we deal with it. So it's sort of thinking about their feelings. And then they sort of went into this themselves, without any prompting from me, to talk about, well, let's focus on those feelings. Why are you having the feelings of, sort of inadequacy and fear and all this kind of stuff? And so they kind of worked on it together between the front and the back seat of the car, and I'd chime in every now and then. And then they talked about the future. So what is the future going to hold? When we get down to the jail, how are we going to deal with one of the COs? She's a nasty piece of work, and she always hassles us, and just gives us just lip and nothing but hassle from the moment we set foot in her jail. So how are we going to deal with that nasty person? How are we going to deal with our client who's freaked out and traumatized and scared and all this kind of stuff and misses his mom? And he's actually younger than my law students. So we talked about how we're going to sort of work our way through that kind of stuff. So again, there's a million different exercises to do this kind of stuff. This just happens to be one that I think works well in a clinical setting. So what I've tried to do, and what I'd encourage you all to maybe play around with it a little bit, my next step is I'm trying to take this to the doctrinal faculty, which is, we all work with doctrinal faculty, right? Anything involving sort of touchy-feely reflection or stuff like that, they're like, whatever, that's not our bag. So last week I gave a presentation to all of our faculty about, mostly doctrinal folks, about how they could weave this into their doctrinal classes. And it's not a great fit, I admit that, but there are some episodes where they're talking about Fall's graph, or where the scales fall over, or whatever happened to the lady, the dynamite blows up on the tracks. I never really got that case. There's a lot of stuff going on. I was like, so poor old Mrs. Fall's graph, who the scales fall on, well, how would she feel? And I don't know, the guy's throwing dynamite off the train. I don't know what the hell's going on in that case. But somehow or another, you could apply this in a sort of a classic torts lecture or something else. So moving beyond our students and sort of the reflection for what we do in our clinical work, I thought this might also be a good jumping off point for what we want to do with this conference. We do pretty amazing work, and we don't, sometimes lawyers can be pretty self-congratulatory and all that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of awards for everything under the sun. But the reality is we change lives. We change our students' lives, we change our clients' lives, and if we let them, they change our lives, for the better mostly. So I guess what I encourage folks to do is to think about this, and what do you want to get out of this conference? So what are you thankful for? What are your feelings? What's your focus? And what's the future of the conference? Because we're a unique community. Law schools as an institution are under siege these days. Clinicians are sometimes the first ones who are thrown over the ramparts. So how do we sort of band together in a collective sense and help each other out? So I just encourage us to reflect a little bit on that, and then we have a final closing number of inspirational music that we thought if you'd like to join us and sing it, it might be helpful.
Patricia?
You want to cue the... there we go.
Well,
oh,
that's right, since we weren't cued before.
The ukulele.
We'll bring back the what? No, this one. That it has it right there. Okay. Do feel free to join us.
Who would like the maracas?
Yeah.
Oh, Virgil.
There we go.
Good job. Good job. How did you get away with that? Who's going to get these?
Who wants
Anybody
the...
want these? Oh, there we go.
They're easy. There you go.
Good job. Okay, who wants the ukulele? Oh. All right.
We're all singing for our supper here, right?
Right.
Climb every mountain, search high and low, follow every byway, every path you know. Climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow, till you find your dream, a dream that will need all the love you can give every day of your life, for as long as you live. Climb every mountain, ford Thank you all.